Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast about your Kindle books and all things Amazon. I'm Len Edgerly. This is the show for September 13th, 2018. Greetings from downtown Denver, where I have returned to our Mile High home for a couple of days to attend a Western States Arts Federation meeting. It was really a remarkable meeting. I'm part of a group that's been working on a project, and we finished it up tonight. So I want to thank Tamara, Taniqua, Michael, Loie, Aaron, Tay, and Ricardo for working with me. I've been out here a few times on this project, and the results of it will be made known in the coming weeks or months. Fantastic organization, Westaff. I was on the board years ago, and they called me back from retirement to work on this. And I'll head back tomorrow morning, Friday, and kind of get lost going back and forth here in the time zones. While I was in Cambridge earlier this week, I recorded a conversation with David Peach, a tech-savvy TKC listener who is director of Deaf Ministries for Baptist International Outreach. He is going to help me cover Digital Book World in Nashville next month, and we had a good time looking ahead to the very full offering of sessions that we hope will be of interest to you. Also this week, disappointing news for book lovers from the National Endowment for the Arts, how you could earn $300,000 delivering Amazon packages, and a special treat at the end of the episode, an original poem about blockchain technology penned by a 91-year-old Kindle lover from Cambridge, Massachusetts, who has been a guest on the show and is one of my chief inspirations for never giving up on new ideas and ways to express them. First up in news is a report from the National Endowment for the Arts, the NEA, that with one notable exception shows adults in the U.S. were reading fewer literary books in 2017 than in 2012. The exception is poetry, which saw an increase in reading for the first time in the history of the NEA's survey, which dates back to 2002. Between 2012 and 2017, the share of U.S. adults who read poetry books not required for work or school rose 76% from 6.7% in 2012 to 11.7% last year. There was a less dramatic increase in the modest percent of adults reading plays from 2.9% in 2012 to 3.7% in 2017. I remember when this series of surveys was launched with much fanfare by Dana Gioia, who was a poet himself and served for a while as the chairman of the NEA. He was at an event that Westaff held in Idaho, I think, and I introduced him on stage. That's a long time ago. But Dana prompted the first report of this nature. It was titled Reading at Risk, and it sounded an alarm about the decline in literary reading. It's been a steady decline since then, never mind the alarms. In 2002, 56.6% of U.S. adults reported they had read a book for recreation in the preceding year. Last year, the share continued its decline to 52.7%. The author of the NEA report, the most recent one, referred to this data series by saying, book reading rates remain on par with those in the two preceding surveys, 2008 and 2012. The results for adults reading novels or short stories is pretty definitely not on par with previous years. That percentage was 45.1% in 2002. It ticked up to 47% in 2008. Thank you, Chairman Gioia, perhaps. It then fell to 45.2% in 2012 and 41.8% last year. It's notable to realize that these percentages are based on a pretty low bar for reading. To be listed among the book readers, a survey respondent only had to have read one book in the previous 12 months. I know those of you listening to this show read a lot more books than that in a year. For the first time in the survey series, the NEA inquired about reading format, and that resulted in the information that the share of book readers last year who had read a book in digital format was 23.3%, and 16.5% said they had listened to an audiobook. This survey, the most recent one, was based on responses from 27,969 adults. I admire Dana Gioia for shining a light on the decline in book reading. It seems like a serious problem for a civilized country. It echoes alarms several years ago by Russ Grandinetti, who at the time was Amazon's vice president for Kindle content. At a time when all the focus was on Amazon versus the traditional publishers, Grandinetti said the real competition for books was video games, TV, and movies. It didn't take much reading between the lines to perceive that he believed Amazon's revolutionary Kindle technology was a pretty important tool in maintaining reading levels. In the current era, I think it's also clear that Amazon Publishing's sane ebook pricing compared with the inflated ebook prices by the big five publishers is also an important tool in promoting reading, making it more affordable. What a concept. Also in news, I'll have a link to a Forbes piece emailed to me by listener Steve Lehos. It includes an Amazon estimate of how much money you could make delivering packages for the retailer. The estimate is based on an entrepreneur setting up a delivery business with help from Amazon, comprising 20 to 40 vans with 40 to 100 employees. Pretty significant small business that would be. That could generate between $1.5 and $4.5 million in annual revenue and annual profit of between $75,000 to $300,000. Those are estimates by Amazon. Startup costs are as little as $10,000, and you begin your business with built-in demand from Amazon, which is undertaking the initiative as a way to complement deliveries by traditional carriers. Dave Clark, who is Amazon's Senior Vice President of Worldwide Operations, issued a statement. This was part of the story in Forbes. He said, "Customer demand is higher than ever, and we have a need to build more capacity. As we evaluated how to support our growth, we went back to our roots to share the opportunity with small and medium-sized businesses. We are going to empower new small businesses to form in order to take advantage of the growing opportunity in e-commerce package delivery." Finally, in news, I'm surprised we have no news yet on Amazon's second headquarters, HQ2. But as I prepare the show on Thursday night, I have an eye. I know Jeff Bezos is going to be making a speech in Washington, D.C. tonight, and that Amazon's board of directors was also in Washington, D.C. So if I had to bet, I'd say Northern Virginia is the most likely pick for HQ2, followed by Boston. Stay tuned. We're supposed to know by the end of the year, and I have a feeling it's going to be sooner than that. For the tech tip, I want to read a comment from David Peach. He's going to be my guest. You're going to hear from him in a minute. You'll hear him talk in the interview about Humble Bundle, and that's a place that he buys ebooks and he side loads them onto his Kindle Fire. He wrote that the books that he gets from Humble Bundle, the more than one book, so it's kind of a collection at good prices, are usually 30 to 100 megabytes in size. He writes, "I think the large size is part of the problem I was having with sideloading them onto the Kindle. Google Books makes the whole process easier. I upload them to my books.google.com account, and they are available to download onto my tablet a couple of minutes later." Now, in order to do this, you have to have Google Play installed on your Fire tablet. That used to be a more complicated task than it is now. This is according to David. He said he's put Google Play on his Amazon tablet, and he hasn't had any trouble with it at all. If you just Google how to use Google Play on Amazon Fire tablet, lots of people have videos and little tutorials on how to do that process. So if you'd like to have the Google Books app on your Fire, that's the way to do it. And if it looks like if you do that, you'll be able to use that Humble Bundle service for buying books that David recommended. Time now for the interview. David Peach is a longtime listener, podcaster, and devotee of digital reading who lives in Knoxville, Tennessee. He reached out to me earlier this year when I began talking about Digital Book World, a conference that I've attended several times in New York City. that in 18 days will reconvene under Bradley Metrock's bold new ownership in Nashville. I've arranged for David to join me as part of the media credentials people at Digital Book World, and he's going to help me cover the dizzying array of great sessions, 66 in all, spread over 2.5 days at the Music City Center. I have booked an Airbnb 2 blocks from the Music City Center, so I'll be right near the action, and I'm looking forward to flying down to Nashville October 1st through the 4th to attend this session. Bradley has set me up for a very nice honor that I'm grateful for. He's going to induct 2 people into the Digital Book World Hall of Fame, and I'm one of them, and noting the 10 years of doing this show every week without missing a show, and I that's pretty pleasant. He surprised me by informing me that that honor is going to be coming my way. The first inductee into the Digital Book World Hall of Fame is Marie Dutton Brown, the iconic editor and literary agent who successfully championed diversity in publishing over the course of her 50-year career. And Bradley writes of her, beginning her career at Doubleday, Marie Dutton Brown dealt with persistent racism directed at both her and her work, but she persevered in championing African-American literature and identity. In a new era defined by increased social awareness of marginalized voices and perspectives, Brown stands tall as a trailblazer, helping move the entire industry in a more progressive and accepting direction. Then he goes on to the second inductee, me. He writes, a model of consistency in a field which barely existed when he began. Len Edgerly took the marriage of publishing and technology and turned it into a recurring show, which has seen every major Amazon executive, including Jeff Bezos, multiple times participate as guests. The Kindle Chronicles effectively documented the meteoric rise of Amazon, serving as a monument to a heady era of evolution within digital publishing, making Edgerly an institution within the industry and a trailblazer long before everyone had a podcast of their own. Well said, Bradley. So anyway, I'm also going to be on a panel and really looking forward to this show. It was a good show in New York, and but boy, I tell you, to go to Nashville and have this thing revitalized so effectively by Bradley and then covering it with David Peach, I'm pretty excited about this. I connected with David by Skype earlier this week from Cambridge. He actually lives in Jefferson City, Tennessee, which is near Knoxville, and we spoke on Monday, September 10th. I began by asking which of the scheduled Digital Book World sessions he's looking forward to most.
Walt Mossberg, that opening keynote, that's certainly going to be a highlight. I'm looking forward to hearing him. I don't follow him. I'm not necessarily a Uncle Walt fan, but I hear people talk about him a lot, and just really, I'm impressed with an older fella that seems to be well connected to technology, and so that's always something that I've been impressed by, even though I really don't necessarily follow him or read his column regularly.
I thought that was an interesting choice, and in talking to Bradley Metrock, that idea of having him set a context with technology in general, I think there's some merit to that.
So that's one session. Then one of the things I did find about the schedule that I think might be passed on to Metrock at some point is some of the session descriptions are very weak. They only say who is speaking and the title of the session, while others are a big old long 40, 50-word paragraph. One in particular that I thought was pretty weak is a company that I think, in my thinking, would have to fight the publishing industry somewhat, and that is the Daisy Consortium. They're working on getting a standard for audiobooks, a standard for access for people that need audio or special needs. And while they're trying to set a standard, I would think the publishing companies we want our own standard.
Right.
And they want it to be proprietary. And so they're their title, the topic of their talk is the Daisy Consortium, and that's it. And I would think they of all people would want to put out more information. So I think some of the descriptions are very weak in here, but then some of them are great. So I'm sure it's the people that are speaking that have written this up, and therefore, some of them could have helped themselves a little better, because there's some I'm not interested in because I have no idea what it's really about.
Yeah, he needs to fill those in so that when we're at the conference, and if the schedule's updated at that point, you really can choose which one you want to go to.
Right. And I would hope that it is by the time we get there. There are a couple others that are of interest to me. Certainly the blockchain ones, I'm sure you're interested in those.
Yeah.
I'm not really up to how blockchain works. I'm just interested in how it can be used in various ways. And then publishing in the age of voice assistants, that sounds like something you would very much be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the speakers there, one of the ladies I think you may have interviewed, I was going to look that up, and I didn't find out, Amy Stapleton.
That name's familiar. What does it say who she's with?
Tellables.
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 Is that like a story skill for Alexa?
It is, yes. And they have several of those skills. And so I thought she sounded familiar to me whenever I started reading about what they do. Mm-hmm. And so I think you may have interviewed them a year or so ago.
Mm-hmm. I'll jump in here to say that David showed himself to be a careful listener to the show. I have not interviewed Amy Stapleton, but Tellables was mentioned in my December 2017 conversation with Bradley Metrock. And I did interview the CEO of another Alexa storytelling skill, Earplay, in November of 2016.
But anyway, there's several things like that that's in the age of voice assistants, in the age of voice first. There are quite a few sessions on that type of topic. So there's a lot to choose from. There's one that I'm interested in only because it's a Christian publisher I know, and I don't really know anything else about what he's covering. Christian Audio is the name of the company, but they make audiobooks from the Christian publishing world. Also, one I'm very interested in is put on by some librarians. I'm very connected into my public library. I'm a big proponent of public libraries. The librarian talk, I'm interested in getting in there and seeing what they're talking about and such.
Are you borrowing a lot of ebooks from your local library?
Probably 90% of all the books I read are borrowed books from the library. Our library uses OverDrive. So I was very glad when they made the decision there, and this was just maybe 4 years ago. They were getting into the ebook lending, and they made the decision for OverDrive, and I was pretty excited about that. So yeah, I get audio and ebooks from the library, and then of course paper books, and that's probably 90% of my book reading. I looked at my list of books this morning just briefly, but I didn't actually break down which ones came from the library or not. If I buy a book, I usually buy a used book. Mm-hmm. Not so much because I'm cheap, but I don't see the reason to spend $30 for a book that I can get for $8 or free at the library. And so that's I am cheap, I guess.
You know the value of $1. Do you find when you're borrowing from your library that you generally have to go on a wait list and wait for the book to become available for you?
No, but when I am on a wait list, it's always a long one. So typically the books that I'm getting are not, nobody else is interested in them, and so I don't end up on a wait list. But if there is a wait list, it is usually because it is a very popular book and it's a long wait list. I did wait for a book. I was getting ready to go to Africa for 3 weeks last year, about this time last year. oh, I got to have this book, And so I put 3 or 4 books on there, and they ended up being on the wait list. And I got them in December. And December when I was tied up with other stuff, so I didn't even get a chance to read them. But I finally got them from the wait list back in September. And so that was a little frustrating. But my wife, tends to read a lot of fiction, and she ends up on a wait list quite a bit. I read a lot of nonfiction, and therefore there's not really much of a wait list. And my library has a very good interlibrary loan system that they're hooked up with. They used to be hooked up with like 4 other libraries. Now they're hooked up with everything from Nashville east in the state of Tennessee. I don't think it's the whole state right now, but it's half the state, which is tremendous. I can get just about anything that's available in print.
Now, there's not an interlibrary sharing that would help you get an ebook faster for a loan, is there?
No, but the way our libraries have done this is they did not buy into ebooks as our own library. It ended up being, I think this one is the whole state of Tennessee. All the libraries in the state of Tennessee are buying into this. So the wait list can be much longer because of that. However, there's quite a few more books available.
Yeah, they're pooling their resources to have probably a bigger supply overall.
Right. I'm actually in Jefferson City, Tennessee, instead of Knoxville, and so we're not in the Knox County library system. Our town is about 8,000 people, so we don't have a large library, but because of the OverDrive system and that we're all buying into it, the whole state, or at least most of the state. When I go into the list and say, okay, where's my library, it just goes on and on and on, and I think it's the whole state. So even though we're a small town, we don't have the big resources, we do have the ebooks available to us because of that.
Now, that OverDrive app, there's Libby, and then you can do it online. You get a Kindle formatted book that way from your library, correct?
Most of the time. Occasionally, it's only available for EPUB.
Oh.
But most of the time, EPUB, which then I use it in Libby. But most of the time, I can get it with the Kindle format.
Now, you're talking about you use a Paperwhite, a Fire HD8, and one resource that I've heard of, I might have talked with them, but I can't remember. It's Humble Bundle. Tell me about that as a source of books.
Humble Bundle is a place originally for doing games. You would buy games through Humble Bundle, and they did this as a fundraiser. I think initially it was, well, it still is. It's a charity thing. They would package a bundle of games, and then you say, I want to buy this bundle of games for $60. And then they took whatever was needed for their costs, and then the charity got the rest, and then whoever was donating the games, whatever company. Well, now they've gotten into where they do books and games and various bundles like this, digital resources. And so I get a lot of bundles from O'Reilly Media, which is technology type stuff. I've gotten several of the bundles, and sometimes the bundles overlap. I'll end up with 3 copies of this particular book, but it's O'Reilly. Well, it's not just O'Reilly. Wiley does it. A couple other publishing companies do it, but the ones that I buy are usually from O'Reilly. O'Reilly has always been very good about making their books available in multiple formats, and so if it's not picture heavy, I read it in the Mobi format on the Kindle. If it is picture heavy, I end up putting it in my Google Play Books account and read it that way because the pictures are better. And the 2 things, I think the Google Play Books app is a little bit nicer than the Kindle app, and it's much easier to get my books into the app than it is into Kindle.
Can you read Google Play Books on your Fire HD8 tablet?
Yes, and that's what I'm reading them on. I did the thing where you can get the Google App Store onto the Fire HD8.
Now, when you did that, and I think I tried that once, it's a multi-step process, not a completely scary process for a layman. But one thing I worried about is when I downloaded all those files and now I have the Google Play Store on my Fire tablet. What happens when Google updates the software? Do those things happen automatically, or do I have to manually go back in and redo it to make sure that I'm current?
Well, not Google. It's the concern is if Amazon updates the software on the Fire. I've never had any problems with Google updating anything, and I have done this to maybe 4 or 5 Kindle Fires, and I don't believe any of them have ever gotten broken from an Amazon update. But that's who the update would come from that would break it, would be Amazon, if they did something that undid the changes that you did. This last one I did on this HD8 that I have now, which I think I mentioned, I'm not sure how old it is. I think it's a year old. It was a very simple process. In fact, I don't actually remember doing it.
That's a good sign.
Yes, it was so simple that it just happened. I did it, and it was simple to do, and so I don't even remember all the steps. But I do remember some of the older Fires that I had that it was a huge process. But this last one was pretty easy.
Can you recall aspects of the Google Play reading app that you prefer to the Kindle app on the Fire?
Actual reading, because I'm just reading the text, and like I mentioned in an email, that the Kobo just kind of gets out of the way. The Kindle Paperwhite, it's out of the way. I just read. So the actual reading process of it, I don't see any kind of difference between the two. It's just really getting the books on there, and the Google Play Books, it seems like it's a little easier to, or has a few more features that I can change this setting, and I like to goof around with that kind of stuff. I made that decision maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, that it was easier to do, and so I tend to read. If I'm getting a book that I'm independently loading on, then I tend to do it in the Google Play Books and not the Kindle app. Mainly because it's easier to put it on there. But then, if it were just as easy, I'd probably still just stick with the Google Play Books. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned you got a Kobo for an impressive bargain at Unclaimed Baggage for $8. How did you do that?
Well, this place, it's the name of it is Unclaimed Baggage, and it's in Scottsboro, Alabama. They buy luggage in bulk that get left at airports, and insurance is already paid off on it, and it was just lost somewhere. And they've got some bizarre stuff in their store that they found in bags, but a lot of the stuff is e-readers and, of course, clothes, lots of clothes, and tools, power tools. They got a paddle board, like a 20-foot long paddle board in there that they bought in one of these big buy it all at the airport things. And so then they turn around and sell it, and they have their newer items end up with a decent price. It's still better than buying it new, but their older things, which is where I got this Kobo, they kind of have this one little section that, okay, here's the last chance before we take it to the landfill. And I picked up this Kobo. It does not have the backlight in it, but it's still the Touch. It's the Kobo Touch without the backlight. And $8, and they even had Kindles there for that price. But I was particularly looking for the screen that I could hack and do something else with, and the Kindle screens are a little more complicated to hack. I don't know why. There's something about the interface, and I haven't even done anything with this Kobo reader other than have it sit beside my chair and think I'm going to do something with it someday.
What was the idea for hacking it?
What I'd really like to do is be able to just use the screen for a display to some device, like a Internet of Things device, where I can, it'd be a panel that I can turn things on and off, but it's not taking up a whole tablet.
I see.
I'm just using the screen on
an
it.
$8 screen that you got at the Unclaimed Baggage store. That's pretty cool. Now, you've also got some interesting podcasting experience. Did you have a video podcast where you were helping people learn how to sign?
Yes. I haven't done that in a couple of years, but it's still out there, still available. LearnSigns.com, and it's just basic vocabulary. I do talk some about the grammar of sign language, but not extensively. That's the kind of stuff that you're really going to learn better from interacting with a teacher, with a deaf friend. But the purpose of my podcast, my video podcast there, was just to give a whole bunch of grammar. And I don't remember how many signs I ended up with on there, but there's 30-something videos. And it's one of these deals, I would like to continue doing it every so often. I just haven't. And I don't really like the video editing side of it, so I always had my wife do it. And then we both got busy, and so I just haven't recorded anything lately. But that's LearnSigns.com. And then my first podcast, or my first real podcast, was MissionaryTalks.com. And Missionary Talks, it was a interview format where I would just talk to missionaries and Christian missionaries. I'm Baptist, but I talk to various denominations for the purpose of just sharing with the listeners that missionaries are normal people. They cry when grandma dies. They have the same kind of struggles we have. They just do it somewhere else in the world. Usually I'm talking to foreign missionaries, but sometimes it's stateside-based missionaries. Some are in the technology field. I talked to one fella that his whole role is to be a network engineer for a mission team in Costa Rica. And so even though he's a technology guy, he's also a missionary, and so I talked to him about that kind of stuff, just to show that missionaries are normal people. I've got 60-something interviews up there on that, and again, while I'm not currently recording them, they're still available and still get listened to.
So would you generally connect with somebody in overseas by Skype and record the Skype call like we're doing?
Many times, yes, Skype, or if I travel in conferences and stuff, and so many times I would be able to just sit down one-on-one with the folks. And I didn't necessarily plan this out months in advance. It was just, here's somebody that I'm with this week. Let me record an interview. And I always try to keep it short. 10 to 20 minutes would be ideal. Sometimes it went longer, but it was usually always at least 10 and somewhere in the 20-minute range.
Well, at the risk of talking shop, I have to, someone who's done as many interviews as that, it interests me. What advice do you have to somebody who's just starting in interviewing people on a regular basis? What makes for a good interview, and what tips have you learned in doing that?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I've been meaning to talk to you.
Let's say it.
No, I remember just I don't know, it was 3 months ago, you talked to a couple that had gone flying around across the U.S. and stuff.
Oh, the Fallowses, yeah. And
at the end of that, you specifically mentioned something about interviewing, and you had heard somebody that was a good interviewer, and you would want to learn, some interview thoughts. And I wanted to say, I think you do a great job. The fact that you've read the book before you talk to them makes a huge difference, and I that shows to me, because I can hear an interview, and I listen to a lot of podcasts and a lot of interviews, author interviews too, and you can tell when the person didn't really read the book, and so I do appreciate the fact that you've read the book. You're asking the questions that that the interviewee wants to answer. Now, obviously, there's sometimes you ask questions they don't want to talk about, and that's okay too. But I feel like you're pulling out the best of what that person wants to say. And it seems like you know the person usually before you interview them. And I know that's not always the case, but it feels like that to us as listeners. So I think you do a good job there. So I was gonna mention that to you after I heard that, and then I was driving, got back home, and I forgot all about it. But I think you do a great job with interviewing. Yes, I think we can all learn better interview techniques. But just listening to a lot of interviews, I think has helped me. And I don't know that I'm a good interviewer, but I like to find out what people are thinking. And I was at a college last year. I was talking to one of the college kids, and she said, "When did you learn to become a good listener?" Well, I don't know that I am necessarily a good listener. She said, "No, I enjoy coming and talking to you." And this is a school I go to every year. And this is now her third year. Or now, in fact, I just talked to her the other day. She is a senior, and I'll see her for one last time here in a few weeks. And so last year was the third year. And she said, "I just enjoy coming and talking to you because you seem to be interested in me." And I appreciated her saying that. But then I got to thinking, that maybe that's what makes a good interview is to be interested in that person.
Yeah. I love that question. When did you learn to be a good listener? You think maybe you learned that at your mother's knee?
Maybe, because I've always felt like Mom has been a good listener. She, teenage boys, we talk about football, we talk about all kinds of stuff that moms don't really care about. But my mom, I know she didn't care about the subject itself, but she always seemed to enjoy. There were 3 boys in the family. We would talk to Mom about everything, and she always seemed to enjoy listening to us talk, even though she didn't necessarily enjoy this subject. And so, yeah, maybe I did learn that from Mom.
That rings a bell with me, with my mother. I'm sure I can have a similar sensation, and it's happened as recently as last night on Echo's show. I was explaining to them about my first Bitcoin purchase in Portsmouth, New Hampshire yesterday in blockchain Bitcoin. And she and Dad have very little grasp of this, but they act like they're fascinated. They just can't wait for me to spend another 5 minutes talking about blockchain. And I think that's true love. That's love-informed listening. I think that they're still doing at 89 and 91.
Yes. Well, I do appreciate a good listener, too. And when I listen to interviews of other podcasters interviewing authors and stuff, I can tell that, this guy's a good listener. And then there's the guys that they would rather hear themselves talk than the person they're interviewing. And so that frustrates me too.
Yeah, some of these feel like they're doing the interview just to create a platform to share their own brilliance, and that can get pretty old. When you mentioned I do try to read the book when I'm talking to somebody. I don't always succeed, but I heard a guy, Dwight Garner, who does great interviews in the New York Times Book Review. And one time he said that he got handed the assignment to interview an author. He hadn't read the book. He didn't know who the author was, and the microphone was on. And so he said, "What is my first question?" And he came up with, "So, your book. Why now?" And the guy talked for 20 minutes.
Right.
That's all he needed.
Yes.
It's a brilliant way out of a tough situation.
Well, one of the things I did tell my interviewees is I'm not looking for a yes or no answer. When I ask you a question, you're welcome to take 5 minutes to answer it. That's fine with me, and I can edit as necessary. Yeah. And that was one thing I always tried to stress early on in the process is just talk, answer, take your time answering my question, and I'm not looking for yes or no. And then, of course, I tried to word the questions so that they're not giving, you can't just say yes or no to it.
Yeah. You give them a platform to go deep.
Jump in.
Well, I think we're going to have a good time in Nashville. I've been impressed with Bradley Metrock's hustle. I think there are going to be 1,000 people there. It's going to be a very big conference, bigger than it was in New York.
and in Nashville, and I think he's just done it by working hard and contacting all kinds of people to participate. Do you have any other sense of why he seems to have gotten off to such a strong start with his first putting on of this conference?
No, and I listened to your interview with him yesterday, and I don't know anything about him, don't know really his background, but he seems to have a vested interest in book publishing, and so
right.
This is a passion for him, and I think that's probably he seems to be a likable guy. He also, based on the schedule, seems like he could be a very controversial fella. So I think those two things together cause you. I know people like that are you either love them or hate them, and if you love them, you really love them, and if you hate them, you really hate them. And I know people like that just get under my skin, but I still like being around them because they're likable. And maybe that's what Metrock is. Maybe he can be controversial as needed, but yet you kind of want to stay close to him, and that may be where he's at and why people seem to be excited about being there.
Yeah, that's a good description of him. Well, I have been speaking with David Peach, who will help me cover Digital Book World in Nashville, Tennessee next month. Thanks very much, David.
You're welcome.
In content, I want to mention a new program that I came across on at Amazon.com. It's called Great on Kindle, and you can, if you buy a book that is as part of this promotion or this new way to provide bargains on books, you get some money back when you buy one of these books. I reached out to an Amazon spokesperson, and she told me a little bit more about this. She said, I can share that Great on Kindle is an easy way to help customers find nonfiction titles that offer a particularly great reading experience and value, with features like high-quality images, X-ray content, and more. These books span across biographies and memoirs, history, health, mind and body, religion and spirituality, business and investing. There are thousands of Great on Kindle books, and we look forward to adding more over time. You can read more about Great on Kindle at Amazon.com/Great on Kindle. If you follow that link, you will find all the Great on Kindle books. They're nonfiction books, not fiction at this point. If you click on one of the books, and I just clicked on a book, John McCain, The Restless Wave, that was written with Mark Salter, and what it shows is that the Kindle price is $14.99, but underneath it says get a 40% credit. So if you buy that book for $14.99, then you build up some credit at 40% on each of these titles. Now, I noticed that when I go over to the Buy Now with one click, it says you have $12.20 in eligible ebook credits. So I think I must have been buying some of these books and getting some credits when I buy them. And there is a email notification that says when some of these have been purchased. 40%, pretty good deal, and a way to promote some nonfiction books. Amazon's doing this pretty quietly, but if you want to check it out, I think there are some very good books listed at pretty significant savings if you use that credit to buy another one. I'll share a couple of comments with you. First, from E.O. Lake Stubblehouse. A quick note, he writes, I think near the end of the last show you said screen resolution when you meant screen contrast. I'm sure that's true. I don't really know the difference between resolution and contrast, so thanks for pointing that out, E.O. Lake. And he also writes, and indeed, I've always thought that screen contrast is the weakest point of the Kindle. Basically, the main reason I have never used them all that much, apart from the slowness of the interface. Yours, E.O. Lake. I also heard from Jim Wellman, who won the drawing for the Kindle Paperwhite to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the show. He wrote, Len, just received the Paperwhite and it arrived in perfect condition. Thank you. Have a feeling it will end up in the hands of my granddaughter. She watches me read on my Oasis. Best wishes, Jim. Before I get to the poem at the end here, I want to let you know that next week's guest will be Scott Pratt, a Kindle direct publishing author who has sold more than 2 million copies of his books, including An Innocent Client, the first in his Joe Dillard series. Now, the author of the poem that I mentioned about is my father, William Edgerly. Dad has been writing poetry for several years now, and he follows a rhyming format that was inspired by a poem by Longfellow, one of his favorite poets. And he puts complicated ideas that he's having, things he's mulling about, transitions in his life, and he captures them in these jewel-like poems. And I have been chattering to him and Mom about blockchain technology lately, so he surprised me by with a sly grin reading me this poem. It's called Something New. Something new called a blockchain, a brand new thing that now exists. Is it a fact that will remain, or a mere word for theorists? Whatever it is, it brings me pleasure, one more delight for my growing treasure. Well, it's a treasure to see my father's creativity at 91 so at the edge and so satisfying. And it's a pleasure to be part of Westaff, the group that brought me out here for this meeting. Feeling very full, also very tired, and up early to fly back to Boston tomorrow. Thanks for listening.